Okay, let's get started. We're a couple minutes late. I'm Richard Esplin. Who attended lightning talks last 2 days? A couple of hands, a lot of. Okay, so we have two types of lightning talks. So lightning talk is a 5-minute presentation. We have two types. We have Ignite style, where the slides auto advance, and we have classic style, where the speakers can control their slides. Ignite style is kind of fun, kind of nice, because you'll always get to the end of the deck, even if the speaker has to cut the middle short. Classic style, I'll have a timer, and if the speaker goes over time, then I'll make an annoying noise and make them leave. We've got 49 minutes of content, so we've got to move really quick, and we might have to skip a couple places. So let's move on to Dan.
So, hello. For those who don't know me, I'm David Webster. I'm a UI engineer at Alfresco. I mainly work on the UI team, and my job enables me to play around with a lot of JavaScript, which is good, because that's what I enjoy doing. And what I've seen is that over the last few years, JavaScript's really been going through a evolution. And it's come from being a ridiculed technology that was avoided 10 years ago to being the lively, ubiquitous platform that it is today. And during that evolution, I think it's been growing up. And the discipline of JavaScript engineering has kind of emerged out of nowhere. And as that's there's a growing community pushing the pace of development of the language forwards. And that pace of change is increasing. And alongside that evolution, we're getting an increasingly smart set of tools, making our jobs easier and enabling us to achieve more faster. One such tool is Grunt, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. And at Alfresco, we're using it internally for some of our new UI projects, and it's really making a change to the pace of development in those teams. So what is Grunt? Well, Grunt's a build tool designed for front-end projects. It's written on top of Node.js, and like Node, there's a fantastic community growing around it. And GitHub is littered in a good way, with plugins for Grunt modules. Now, each Grunt module does a single task. And this is the example config for a task that takes images in a folder and combines them into a sprite sheet. So if you can think of a client-side dev task that can be automated, Grunt can do that, and really the sky's the limit. And when you start combining each of those individual tasks together, you produce something much larger and much more useful than those individual tasks would enable you to do on their own. So what I'm going to do now is show a couple of examples of how we're using it. And first up's our default task, and this acts as the distribution build. So in it, we have Grunt clearing the target folder, and then getting ready to do the build. Runs through the tests, compiles the Sass CSS, injects the Bower managed libraries into the HTML, copies the necessary files to the right place, builds the sprite sheet using the config we saw earlier, does some minification to the JavaScript and CSS, and then finally adds the MD5-based cache busting. And once that's done, all the code in that distribution folder is ready for deployment. So that's the first task. Next up is the test task, and that's a combination task that, again, does some setup. It lints our code, runs some karma tests, and part of that does some code coverage analysis as well, and that's all bundled up into that one task. This is our day-to-day dev task that we use. It does some setup again, lints our JavaScript, compiles the Sass, injects the libraries, sprites the images, and injects the live reload code into the HTML, and then starts up our dev server. And it also watches the file system for any changes and injects those changes into the browser, so we don't have to reload the page when we're developing. When it comes to Grunt architecture, I like to think of it as a bit like a Lego. So the individual blocks are simple, but put them together in the right way, and you can do impressive stuff with it. And you can entirely mold it into a tool that's custom for you. But just like a wayward piece of Lego on the carpet, misuse can end up hurting you, and you can quite easily tie yourself into knots with a confusing build tool. So I think you need to put the time and the effort into working out what you want to do and understanding the what's and the whys of the needs of your build system. So you need to start off by planning it properly. And then once you've worked out what you need to do, you can have a look at the modules, start installing them. And so this is Grunt's installed using Node Package Manager. These are a couple of commands you need to use to install it. You install the modules in exactly the same way. And that save dev flag is important. That saves it to the package JSON file. So once you've got your modules installed, you need to load them into your Grunt file. You can either load them individually, or I like to load them all at once using this match dep filter and a wildcard. And then really you've got the config to write. And that's a quick whirlwind tour of Grunt. Hopefully you're inspired to take a look at it and see how you can use it to put your content to work. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes, it's better. So, hello everyone. My name is Romain Pascal. I'm Android developer at Alfresco. Today I want to talk about tools I use nearly every day, and tools the Alfresco mobile team use to build and create continuous integration for the mobile application and the mobile SDK. So let's begin. So the Android team is responsible to deliver two major components, one application and one SDK that runs on the Android platform. Our job is to make sure that nearly whatever Android device you are using, you are able to communicate with an Alfresco server. To accomplish this mission, for each version, we have to release nearly 10 different artifacts composed by a mix of Android application, Java library, Android library, and test project. Different project means different build methodology. For each version, we have to test them on different devices, which runs on different versions of Android. Small screen, large screen, phone, tablet. In Android world, we can choose whatever you want. Then, after all, we have to check that our API can retrieve information from less than 4 different versions of Alfresco. It means different format, different URL, different parameters. We clearly have a lot of works. Anyway, at this moment, this question is, how can I make my life simpler and easier? How can I make our delivery process faster and more reliable? Our solution was to build a continuous integration delivery of our product. Everything starts with a meeting planning. We decide with our product manager how many time we have and how many features we want to implement. At the end, we have to deliver something that works, even if it's incomplete. Each feature is then incorporated inside our Jira system. Developers and rest of the world can then discuss each feature. For example, we exchange on some edge case or define the feature more precisely. Next goes my time. It's coding time or development time, where a developer takes a feature and tries to implement it with success or not sometimes. But at the end, there's always a result. This code is installed inside a private developer GitHub version control. Each developer has its own repository where he can do nearly everything. When the developer considers his code is stable, he can then promote it to the master repository with a pull request. The pull request event is triggered by our Bindu server. Bindu is our automation tool at the center of our continuous integration process. It's responsible to launch again and again the same cycle. So first, Bindu launches the build phase. This phase is managed by Maven. Maven knows how to build an Android application, how to build a library, or Java library. It's a perfect tool for this job. Next phase is the unit test. With the help of Maven Android plugin, we can execute the same test on multiple devices and multiple Alfresco versions in parallel. After that, it's a UI test phase. We use Eggplant for test plan, a proprietary tools. The principle is simple. We write a script. This script is run by Eggplant with the help of VNC client, and it uses image and character recognition to validate or not the test. When all tests are finished, Bindu runs the control phase in conjunction with SonarQube. With this tool, it's possible to retrieve a bunch of quality code metrics and reports. And finally, when all phases are done, we can distribute our artifacts. First, we distribute in our Maven repository based on Nexus application. It allows developers to retrieve and share easily the latest artifacts. Applications, on the other side, are distributed by another tools called OkiApp. This tool is responsible for live beta testing. It allows crash reports, user feedbacks, automatic update, and collects some analytics. And here we achieve a complete cycle of continuous integration based on multiple tools. We can do this cycle again and again until we obtain the result we accept in terms of quality, features, and completeness. After multiple cycles, we are ready to release a new version. At this time, in terms of process, we need a validation from all Alfresco departments. A meeting is defined, and we conclude if we have to release a product or not. The release phase is still, for the moment, a manual phase. Even if it's possible to automate this part, we prefer, for the moment, to manually upload the application to the Play Store and tag manually our code in GitHub. Finally, in the future, it's simple. We do it again and again. We design, we develop, and we deploy again and again. We release small, but we release often. This concludes my presentation. My name is Jean-Marie Pascal. I want to thank you all, and for more information, please follow the link.
Hello, that's Barb. Good morning. I'm Michael Suzuki. I'm an engineer with Alfresco. And today we're going to talk a bit about Selenium automation on Alfresco. So a bit about the history. In Alfresco, we do quite a bit of testing around the product. But of late, we wanted to do more testing and improve the quality of the product even more. So we came up with a way to automate and test Alfresco Share, which is quite complex and a challenge, if you can say. So the way we went about it is creating a new project that deals with doing that, and it's called the WebDrone project. The WebDrone project, in essence, is an ability for us to mimic real user interaction with Alfresco Share to drive the product and see how it behaves. And it's basically split into two things. The WebDrone itself is an unmanned browser that does the work, and it's a wrapper to Selenium WebDriver with additional functionalities such as screenshots that we can take. And the Selenium WebDriver is basically an engine beneath it. And it's the tool that interacts with the browser. It's a W3C standard now and supports different languages and OSs. Now, the important area is the shared page object. The shared page object is based on the page object pattern. What it is you have a page that you see, and we map it to an object. That hides all the complexities of the HTML, JavaScript, so you don't really need to know any of that. All we do is expose some simple APIs that allows you to interact with the page, and thus reducing the complexity. The other advantage of it is that we're able to unit test it as it's a page. Now, you can see in the diagram behind me that it supports a hierarchy. The beauty about this is that it gives us the ability to reuse the code. So we reduce duplication. So take an instance document library page, has few functionalities, and it extends abstract share page, which has other functionalities. So it inherits these functionalities, making it far more reusable, easier to maintain, and far readable. Now, the render interface is something we've added on to this new pattern, and it gives us the ability to stabilize the product. One of the challenges with Selenium WebDriver is that it can be sometimes flaky, and the test might intermittently fail. And that's to do with how it does things too fast for the browser. So the render interface is a logic that checks that the page is loaded correctly, and all the elements are ready before you can actually use it. So why use page objects? It encourages reuse of the code. It makes it easier to test. It's more readable and hides all the complexities of the page into that object. And we're going to quickly see how a test looks now. This is the new way of writing the test. Very concise, straight to the point, and it's a login test. In the past, what we had was a very long test, as you can see, and beside it, that test used to be cut and pasted to every section to just do that particular thing, which is to log in into a page. So we've reduced it into a very tiny 4 lines of code to just assert that. And beneath that show appeared now is what we reuse, and that's a class that we use over and over and over again. So every test now will be concise and short, and the page object drives it and handles all that complexity. So things that we've learned through our experiences to avoid are thread sleeps, and these are unconditional. You can wait, and if you put 4 seconds thread sleep here and there in the test, and you have 1,000 tests, that's going to take a very long time. So do not do that. And other things, not mixing the code, the test code, and the actual WebDriver code. So what we see here behind us is the actual demo, and it's run by Maven. All we do is tell it where the target URL, which at the moment it's Alfresco 4.20 on my local machine. So what we're going to do here is just test the document library page test object and just make sure that it works. And as you can see, I'm not using hands to drive this. It's doing it by itself. And it takes the elements of the page and finds it and interacts with it. All we do is pass it CSS IDs or locators to find elements of the page, and it's smart enough to go do it and click on it and interact with the page. So as you can see, we're now testing on the document library page how to create folders and documents, and now we're tearing down the test and deleting the site as we're done with the test. So the aim of the WebDrone project is to make a library that's easy, reusable, and shared by everyone. It's open source, and we hope to grow it and make it more available for everyone to make your life easier and our life easier. And these are the details where you can find it, my details as well, if anyone has more questions. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Parzgnat. I'm a project manager and technical architect at Technology Services Group. We're an Alfresco partner based in Chicago. I'm going to go over today an advanced versioning and security management presentation. This is based on some versioning things that we've had to do in the past for some of our controlled document clients. And I have to apologize, I only have half a brain and half a voice today, thanks to the pub crawl last night. So I'm going to go over the default versioning behavior in Alfresco, some of the limitations of that default behavior, and some ways that we've worked with Alfresco and the API to resolve some of our issues for our controlled document scenario. So the base versioning behavior in Alfresco starts with you have to apply the CM versionable aspect to any content that you want to be versionable. And then each version is, in effect, a snapshot of that content at any point in time. And that snapshot includes the properties, the content, and any associations with other objects. The snapshots are stored separately in Alfresco from the main content store. They're stored in a version store. And by default, the versioning happens automatically anytime that properties or content is changed. So I have a little diagram basically to walk through kind of how versioning works. So if I upload a new document, immediately when I apply the versionable aspect, it immediately takes the first snapshot and throws the snapshot into the version store. From there, anytime that I update properties or content, a new snapshot is taken. So this is a little slow. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is some of the challenges that we have with this particular model in dealing with some more advanced scenarios. Some of the problems are auto-versioning results in a lot of versions being created behind the scenes. If we're making a lot of versions, it could potentially be a performance issue if we have tons of versions for every single document. Also, behaviors and other system events can trigger snapshots to be made when we don't necessarily need them. Another big problem is previous versions can't be searched, and we also can't change different versions of documents to have separate ACL permissions. So the scenario I've been talking about is for controlled documents, and controlled documents in regulated industry is kind of a whole different beast when it comes to versioning. Basically, they have an approved document that they want the world to see, to search and find, but at the same time, they might have a work-in-progress document that's a draft version that only authors of content can see until it goes through a workflow and gets approved. So if we start off with an approved 1.0 document, for the sake of the demo, it doesn't really matter how it got approved, but if we start there, and then if there's a change that needs to be made to this document, a content author needs to check it out, and we want that version to be a work-in-progress document that's in draft, but we still want the 1.0 version to be searchable by the rest of the world. So while the draft is a work in progress, it can be versioned multiple times if there's multiple edits to that content. So we might end up with that 1.1 getting versioned to 1.2, 1.3, and so forth. Eventually, when that document is ready to go through workflow, it would go through an approval cycle, and then that 1.3, the latest draft version, we would actually want to change the version number to become a 2.0. We want to delete any of the previous minor versions and then move the version that was 1.0 to superseded. So kind of complex. So some of the challenges that we were faced with were property and content updates made by behaviors and other backend processes were causing unwanted versions to get created. So the way we work around that is fairly simple. You're able to disable the auto-versioning on property update and auto-version on content update within the content model. So then we have full control over the versioning and snapshot process via the Alfresco API. The second challenge that we had was basically when we have a document that is a work in progress, there's some times where there's a snapshot of the document, but we still need to edit metadata on that snapshot. The way we work around this basically is if we have a 1.1 draft version, we need to make a property change. We essentially just blow away in the version store the 1.1 snapshot, make our property change, and then recreate the 1.1 snapshot. This is very easily done within Alfresco behaviors. And our third and largest challenge was figuring out how do we set different permission sets on different versions of a document. Mainly this was because we need a lot of people to be able to find the approved version, but we don't want everyone to see the drafts. The way we worked with this is basically for every major version of the document, we're creating a separate Alfresco node rather than keeping them all in the same version tree. They're separate nodes that get associated together using an association that we call supersedes. So we might have a approved version that supersedes another superseded version, and we might have a newer draft version node tree that supersedes the approved. So I'm sorry that was really fast, but come see me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Hi, folks. I'm Bindu Wavell. I'm the chief architect at Zia Consulting. And for the last year or so, I guess 2 years, we've been working with Workdesk. We've also been working on some sort of CMS-only client projects where architecturally we want to have kind of a clear separation
between a UI and Alfresco on the back end, and we want to use CMIS for that. So that can be challenging because CMIS has a very sort of clear domain model, a set of objects, documents, folders, properties, and it has kind of a clear set of things that you can do with those, and you can't extend that. So we had some insight, which was, well, what you can do is you can define custom types, and on those types, you can have custom properties. And then in Alfresco, you can have behaviors that act based on the type of a document and the properties on those documents or folders. So basically, for an example, let's say in Workdesk, the email capability, if you want to email a link, that works in a sort of standard way and will work in most environments. But if you want to email an attachment, it basically only works with Outlook or Lotus Notes right now. So we needed to build a UI that allowed our customer to send emails. And the way that works is we have a UI in Workdesk where you select documents in Workdesk. You fill out a form for who the recipient is and the subject and the body of the email. And we actually create an object in Alfresco called an email request that has all of that data in it. And then a behavior picks that up and actually sends the email on their behalf using the email capabilities built into the Alfresco server. In fact, there was a property on the email request object, which is the status. So the UI can actually look at that and see if it was successful or a failure. So we kind of noticed we've been doing this a lot, and I'll give you some more examples of how we've been doing this. So we called this the CORSET pattern, which is CMIS Object Remote State and Execution Transfer, which is sort of just funny, right? It's doing REST, doing RPC over CMIS. And one of the folks at Zia noticed that actually, if you look at the definition in the Gang of Four book on the command pattern, this is actually a pretty clear implementation of the command pattern. So we could just call it the command pattern over CMIS. So some stuff that we do with this are sending emails, like I described. We can create and manage users and groups, and actually also entitlements. So the way for doing enabling, adding some user or group to have rights on a document or folder over CMIS is pretty convoluted. So we have a mechanism where we have a certain set of properties where you just put in usernames, and on the back end we have a behavior that can automatically set the right entitlements up. So it's actually a kind of a cleaner way of doing that than what is exposed over CMIS. We're also doing template folder hierarchies. So when you create a folder of a certain type, it looks at the type, it looks at some properties, and it determines a folder structure and automatically builds that out. We're also using this to trigger classification, notifications, transformations, some sort of lightweight workflow capabilities, and even some kind of triggering other external systems like redlining for legal documents, which, like doing compares or scrubbing documents where you're removing metadata and things like that. And that's it. And there's a blog article on contentpeople.com if you're interested in seeing a little bit more detail, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Ishwar Eluri. I'm from Reva Solutions, principal at Reva. Today I'm going to talk about control documents quality management system. We have implemented for several clients of ours, and I'm just going to go through a few features that I think of useful across different implementations. So we out of the box, Alfresco has a few limitations around what we can see, and especially in a regulatory environment, and how users can navigate. So we have implemented a few features like custom views around document lists, audit trail, workflow, history, and things like that. So here's one of the document list view. As you can see, we have added a custom information in the data list, like document ID, document type, extra information, so they don't have to go into the view attributes. And also the version and the revision of the document shows up right when we are viewing the document library. In addition to that, like we implement custom properties, especially around the drop-down list or cascading drop-down list, and this is all driven through a data list configurable. So one of the cool things that we did is everything is configurable. It's driven by business rules, and all the business rules are implemented using data lists in Alfresco. Like here is the example document category and document type. The moment you change the category, the type changes and the other information changes. Here is a detailed view. The same thing on the top. We have when a user views the document, you can see all the basic information on the top of the document instead of having to go to the right and scroll down. Additional other feature is out of the box Alfresco, you can just see the current workflows the document has been, but we also show the workflow history, whatever other workflows it has gone through. One of the key drivers in this implementation was user wanted to make sure that when we are done with the project and we leave, they don't want to go back and change the code. They want to be able to configure most of the stuff. A lot of things that we did is document type definitions, aspects, and everything is done through data lists. Document ID generation, like unique numbers, like the starting numbers and things like that. Value assistance fields. The other big part that we changed, that we implemented here is having a single workflow. Like the process is the same, but the reviewer and approver groups will change based on the document type. So it's all driven by the business rules and come out of the data list rather than a. So we have implemented a solution around that too. Here is a sample document for data list where you can define all the category types, the abbreviation code that will be used. Another path is the destination path is one of the things that is like auto foldering. Once the document is approved, which folder it should go to. That path can be determined on the fly using a metadata on the document and plus few other fixed paths if you are. Here are the few things that came out of our requirements is in the workflow enhancement. One of the key ones is out of office. If somebody is out of the office, there's a way to flag that you're out of office, and then all the workflows that are getting assigned to him will be delegated to the person. And the delegatee can be taken from an Active Directory or from a data list. It can be configured. Then we have implemented a lot of escalation and notifications. So right now the tasks are sent only the people who are involved in the workflow, the notifications. We have added features where you can actually notify at the end, at the announcement of the document, or at the end of a task, or after every task, that it can go to different groups, not just the people involved in the workflow or the workflow manager. So here is we have updated the user profile, and where, as you can see, on leave is a flag where they can say whether you're on leave or not. Once you set it, it automatically picks up your the person that it can be delegated to, and once you're back in the office, you can set it back as you're in. The other couple of few things that we did when we started workflow is like the title, the message, they are blank out of the box, and these are all business rules driven, and then you can define based on a doc type that's attached. These are defaulted to certain messaging. And the due date is another big part. A lot of users don't know what's the due date of a workflow would be, like by default. So we take it from a business rule, calculate it, and then default it based on the document type that's attached. As out of the box, Alfresco task inbox has a single area to add attachments. So we have created two areas. One is for the main documents, and the second area is for reference documents, so that people can clearly see which are documents are part of the workflow and which are a reference and supporting documents for the workflow. And as I mentioned, the notifications, you not only can send only to the task owners or the people involved in the workflow. Sorry.
10 seconds.
Thank you. Okay, and this is a custom user picker list, so you can pick from a default groups that are assigned instead of going through thousands of users and finding the user. And here's we keep the audit trail, review history, and approval history on the documents that you can see. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Come on up. So it's way brighter up here than, I ever thought. No wonder,
Hey, everybody. Yeah,
There we go.
pretty loud.
Okay, timer starting.
All right, good stuff. Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Jim Nasr, and here's my colleague Dimy Jeannot. We're from Armedia, and we're going to excite you with a semi-ignite presentation that I just found out about. So, federated search is something that's relevant. I think John and company talked about it, and we're going to elaborate on it a little bit. So we're kind of a basic, simple company, simple and smart, hopefully. So we're going to talk about the 5 W's. So what is federated search? Federated search really is the ability, in our case, to search across multiple Alfresco repositories. But beyond that, Alfresco and non-Alfresco, I think we all know content lives in many different places. But really to return back a result set in a single form, prioritized, aggregated, to make it useful. Currently, there is no Alfresco federated search, though I know John and company are working on it, and there's a number of other solutions. And the one that we like and have been working with is called VirtualWorks. I don't see them around here, but we represent them anyways. So federated search really, I think, is obvious why it's needed. Content is in many different places, but really including shared drives, Outlook, your Dropbox, and to make it useful, to be productive, you want to bring it back into one place because this is this Ignite piece. Many different sources, and one centralized locked index is a way for you to be able to get that and make use of it. So who is VirtualWorks? VirtualWorks really is a bunch of very technical and credible folks from kind of the founding engineers of Citrix. They have built a number of connectors already, and we have been working with them on the Alfresco connector. And we have a demo of that. So in terms of timing, I think really this is overdue. We've seen this as a demand, pent-up demand by a number of our clients. As we heard from Andrew McAfee, big data is very, very relevant. A lot of volume, a lot of velocity, as well as variety and veracity for that. Where is this being applied? Really, VirtualWorks right now supports multiple platforms: Alfresco, SharePoint, OpenText, Outlook, shared drives, and both on-prem and off-prem. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Dimy for the solution.
Hey, everybody. I'll go pretty quickly. We only have about 2 more minutes, and I don't want to be whistled on. So from a how perspective, it's all about aggregated search. So rather than federating, you're creating a single index that you can work through. If you take a look at this slide, this Alfresco doesn't live in a silo just by itself. And I remember everyone speaking about how Alfresco is being deployed to departments. And so you need to be able to search. So if you have an Alfresco in your finance department, marketing may not be able to search it without having to do 2 searches, right? So this just gives you a quick view of that. From an architecture perspective, they have many different connectors. So if you take a look at the bottom row, being able to search, as Jim mentioned, many different types of repositories, not just Alfresco. And then they have a robust API that exposes this information. And what we want to do, and what we'll show you next, is exposing it within the Alfresco user interface. So we're going to walk through a demo. Hopefully it starts. Great. So here we log in. Notice we're in the Alfresco UI. We're able to do a typical Alfresco keyword search, searching for the word annual, and we come back with 1 result. We can also do an advanced search, and everyone's familiar with this. It's just a typical advanced search where you can do keyword searches and refine your information. But what we've introduced is a federated search where you can click on it. So within the Alfresco UI, search for a value. And not only do you get results from this Alfresco repository, you also get results from many different Alfresco repositories and Exchange servers, et cetera. So this is a picture from one Alfresco repository. And here we're clicking on a document from the finance department. So here's an annual report that doesn't have all the information. And notice that most folks send emails all the time. right? So it also indexes email, and it does OCR. So that's one of the key things that we don't do today is OCR content. So that's huge. So we're going to go ahead and open up this document. It may be paused. And from here on the left-hand side, is it paused, Jim? After this, you'll take a look. They also introduce this concept of faceted searches as well, where you can. Okay, it's all good. Let's not worry about it. So I don't want to get whistled on, but this is essentially it, and it's pretty cool. So we'll be in touch, and you guys know where to find us. Here, here's our information. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Test 1 2. Okay. So, all right. Next. There it is. There it is. So, okay. So today I want to talk about a quick tool that is, I think, very cool, and I use it a few times to be able to get some very fast information about database profiling. Does any of you have been to my session yesterday on database on the main session? All right, a few people. All right, so we talked about this a bit earlier today. So the agenda is going to be very short. Short introduction, overview, the benefits I see in the tool, and then setup steps and a few examples. So about me, I've been a solution engineer at Alfresco for about 4 years now. I've been involved mainly in pre-sales, a bit of consulting sometimes. I'm based in Paris, France. My Twitter hashtag is @Romain, so please do tweet how awesome this presentation is. My email address is over there. The tool objectives. So basically what I wanted to have is something that could give me some very detailed performance analytics of the query per query type, meaning I don't want to have a million different response times. I just want to have the different queries and the performance for each of these, even if they have different values, as you'll see a bit later. I wanted something that was quick, easy to set up, no dependencies or minimal dependencies. And I don't want to have even the access to the DB itself, because sometimes the DBA doesn't want to give access, or it's a remote location or whatever. Something that could be used on the application server side, which you have access. All right. So just a quick overview. It's a combination of a tool that's made by Percona, a company that is a MySQL consulting company. They provide a tool suite that is GPL-based, open source. And there's a tool from this tool suite that's called PT Query Digest that's able to parse many sources of information, i.e. The general log, the MySQL network protocol, if you are using TCP/DOM, for example. And I just extended that to be able to parse out logs from P6Py. P6Py is a logging JDBC driver, so that you can just use it to be able to parse those logs and get some very detailed information. As you will see later, all the links and information is available on Alfresco Wiki. The benefits, as I mentioned, is to be able to have the performance from an application server side of things, not necessarily from the DB. There might be some network overhead and stuff. So you just want to have to be able to see exactly how the DB performs from the application server. And you want some statistical detail about it. You just not want just the average. The average doesn't mean anything. You want 95 percentile, 99 percentile, variance to mean, index of dispersion, stuff like that. As I said, you don't need to have access to the DB itself. So you can also, what is interesting is that compared to just the general tool suite, you can also parse out queries from any database, because basically you are doing on the driver side, and the syntax is basically SQL, so you don't care about actually what DB is behind it, unless you have very specific syntax, but that's very unusual. So basically the setup is very simple. You just need a jar in the class pass, a small config file that's basically 5 lines. You just tell it where you want it to log and what is your actual DB driver, because P6Py does not replace your DB driver, it just passes through it. Configure the DB driver then in Alfresco global properties and say that you want to use P6Py instead of the actual driver. And then you can make an analysis of this very quickly in parsing out the log file, either with details or simple profile. And this can run on another machine, actually. You can have the log produced on the server and then log it and analyze it later on another machine. So I don't know if you can see very clearly in the back, but hopefully you can. This is a very simple summary example. Basically, you can have for all the queries that are running a detailed view of all of them. And they will be aggregated per query type, meaning the same query that has different value will be categorized as the same query ID. And you will get the response time, you will get the percentage that is represents for the whole duration of the test, the response time per call of that query, the variance to mean, all sorts of different statistics, and basically an example of the query. If you want a more detailed example of the query, you can have it there for one specific query, which it will give you, for example, much more details about that specific example query, and you have at the bottom an example of that query itself that will be categorized as one query type. And you can have very different percentages, the percentage that it represents for the whole duration of the test, the minimum response time for the query, maximum, average, 95 percentile, standard deviation, median, and stuff. The links are available on the slides. Please do try it and give me some feedback. I hope you liked it. Cheers.
Applause for these excellent presentations.